You've been asking too many questions. Load paths, wind bracing, like you are the architect. This is a construction site. You are banned from this trailer. Stay out. If you touch another blueprint, you are done.
The man he addressed didn't argue. He didn't even blink. He just shifted the worn leather portfolio, faded AIA Fellow stamp on its corner, and stepped back into the sun. Outside, grinders screamed and cranes swung, but the quiet inside that man was louder.
What happened in there? That starchitect was red-faced. You all right?
He doesn't want me asking design questions, so I'll stop asking.
But you know more about this structure than anyone. Why do you let him push you around?
What matters is what I build, not what I know, and I've got concrete to pour.
What no one on that site could know was that the hands now gripping a trowel had once designed the 3 glass towers rising behind him. Richard's hands fell back into the rhythm of concrete, but his eyes kept drifting to the steel columns already rising against the skyline.
You are staring at those beams like you are checking a kid's homework.
Just an old habit. That northernmost column should have been seated 4 inches higher.
Inside the blueprint trailer, the lead architect was finding the same flaw the hard way.
The stress concentration at joint B-14 is twice what the model predicted. That column will buckle.
He ran the numbers twice more. The design he had fought for was failing before the 5th floor was even poured.
Mr. Sloan, I have a structural problem. The load path on the northeast corner, it's terminal.
We've got 300 million riding on this tower, Stephen. I am bringing the partners. We'll be on site tomorrow morning.
Outside, under the floodlights, Richard paused and studied the very joint that was failing. He didn't have to run the numbers. He just knew, and knowing felt like a weight he wasn't ready to lift. Not yet. By 6 a.m., the floodlights were off, but the trailer fluorescents were already burning.
Helen, I've tried every truss variant. The B-14 joint won't transfer the load.
He still doesn't see it. That joint needs a Virendil.
Shortly after 7, a black SUV pulled through the site gate. Margaret Crane, senior partner, stepped out and froze before reaching the trailer.
Who is that man? The one with the old hard hat.
The site supervisor told her his name was Richard Reeves. He'd been on the crew since 2001.
Reeves. Richard Reeves, 1996. I handed him his AIA Fellow pin.
David Sloan called her name from the trailer doorway, but she stood frozen. She walked into the trailer with the others, but her mind was caught on that impossible face. Margaret caught up with Richard as he clocked out, and her request for coffee was not a question. In the warmth of a corner coffee shop, she laid her decades-old memories beside his worn leather portfolio.
I recognize that stamp. AIF Fellow, 1996. I handed you that pin myself.
That was a long time ago.
You designed 3 of the firm's most celebrated towers. Why are you here, pouring concrete?
Because I wanted to build things that stood up, not reputations. The name Richard Reeves died in 1999.
She waited, the steam from her untouched coffee rising between them, but he offered nothing more.
The tower your crew is building right now is failing at the 5th floor. You could save it.
If you tell anyone here who I really am, I'll walk off this site tonight. I just want to pour concrete.
She looked at the faded AIA stamp on the corner of his portfolio, then at his concrete-dusted fingers, and nodded slowly, as if filing that secret away. The next morning, in the partners' conference room, Stephen laid out the stress simulations with shaking hands.
I can't fix it. The load path requires a truss I haven't designed. I need outside help.
You said you could handle this tower. If you can't solve it, we'll bring in someone who can.
I know a retired engineer who consults anonymously. On one condition, his identity stays sealed.
That evening, she waited at the coffee shop again. The problem blueprints rolled beside her.
Richard, I am asking for an anonymous look, not a commitment. Tell me if it can be fixed.
You are asking me to walk back into a room I left 25 years ago. I don't do that.
You don't have to walk in. Do it here on a napkin. No one will ever know.
Total anonymity. No official role. I never meet the partners. Those are my terms.
He reached for the napkin dispenser, uncapped her pen, and did not look up. The blueprints covered the table, and Richard's finger found the stress point instantly, circling it with the pen cap.
The load at B-14 will transfer horizontally instead of vertically. That's not a design. It's a slow collapse.
He didn't hesitate. The pen moved across the napkin like it remembered a language his voice had forgotten. Line by line, a Vierendeel truss took shape, the same form that had made his 1996 tower an icon. 8 minutes passed, and the napkin held a diagram so precise an engineer could build from it. Margaret stared at the napkin, her professional awe mixing with the secret she now had to bury.
This is brilliant. I haven't seen a solution this clean since you.
Don't start. Tell them an anonymous retired engineer sent it. Not me. No one needs to know the man who drew this. Pours concrete every morning.
He slid the napkin across the table, closed his leather portfolio, and walked out, leaving the secret between them. The next morning, Margaret walked into the partner's suite with a folded napkin and a lie she was told to protect. She laid it flat on the polished table, and the room went silent.
A Vierendeel truss adaptation. Who consulted on this? It's brilliant.
An anonymous retired structural consultant. His condition: no credit, no name.
I've never seen a retired engineer draw with this signature line. It's too familiar. That curve on the truss joint. It's identical to the 1996 tower. I need to search old files.
Stephen didn't celebrate. He studied the napkin like a detective comparing a forged signature.
This solves the load. We implement it tomorrow. I don't care who sent it.
After the meeting, Stephen returned to the trailer alone, his laptop already pulling up project archives from 1995.
This isn't a random consultant. Someone inside this firm drew that. Someone they forgot.
He didn't sleep. The laptop stayed open in his hotel room, pulling up personnel files from 1996. A photograph surfaced, a young black architect at the AIA Fellow ceremony, holding his certificate.
He opened his phone, a grainy shot he'd taken of the older worker at the site, hard hat and all.
On the screen, two faces, one young, one aged, shared the same eyes, same jaw, same calm.
Then he overlaid the napkin sketch onto the 1996 tower's original blueprints. The truss lines matched precisely.
The 4-panel Vierendeel adaptation was not just a solution, it was a signature he had seen before.
It's him, the concrete worker I'd banned. He designed the 1996 tower. He designed all 3 of them. I threw out the man who built this firm's legacy, and he still fixed my mistake.
Stephen sat on the edge of the bed, the napkin and the photos spread before him, his arrogance caving in. The architect who had built the skyline he admired was now the man he had banned from a blueprint trailer.
You are the one who drew the napkin. You designed the 1996 tower. Why are you hiding here pouring concrete?
No one asked who I was. Now you have your solution. That's all that matters.
Margaret had been searching for them. She turned a corner and stepped into the standoff, her expression already knowing.
Stephen, he's the retired consultant. I asked him to help. Anonymously was his only condition.
1 tower. I'll consult on this 1 tower. But I have terms, and they are not negotiable.
Name them, whatever you need, Richard. The firm owes you that.
A fee of 1.4 million. I won't keep a cent. It funds a scholarship for black architecture students.
He doesn't want fame or money. He just wants to build. And I tried to stop him.
I'll take this to the partners immediately. You have my word, the scholarship will exist.
Richard nodded once, lifted his trowel, and turned back toward the concrete forms, the dust rising around his boots as he walked away. The consultancy began the next morning, though no one on the crew knew its true shape. Richard walked the floor with Margaret and Stephen, his hand gesturing at a misaligned joint, an architect's precision wrapped in a worker's vest. Near the concrete mixer, Jamal noticed Richard's leather portfolio lying half open, its yellowed drawings exposed.
Richard, these drawings, those towers and the skywars and the skyline, did you do these?
A long time ago. They're nothing now, just paper.
By late afternoon, the rumor had spread through the crew in whispers. The quiet man with the old hard hat had once been one of them. Stephen felt the shift. Every time he gave an order, he caught workers glancing at Richard for confirmation.
The reinforcing grid goes here, not there. I've said it twice.
Then he turned and saw Richard standing 20 feet away, trowel in hand, watching without a word. Stephen's jaw tightened. He lowered his voice, and for the first time he didn't finish his sentence. 3 days into the consultancy, a news drone buzzed over the steel skeleton, its camera locking onto the man who gestured like an architect. By mid-afternoon, the firm's PR department had called Margaret twice, demanding answers about the concrete worker in the footage.
Channel 7 has drone footage of you directing structural changes. They're running a piece on the mystery concrete engineer.
Let them run it. My terms were clear. I am not here for cameras.
They'll dig into your past. Decide now, go public on your own terms, or let them define the story.
Late that night, long after the crew had cleared out, Stephen found Richard sitting alone on a stack of steel plates, staring at the skyline.
I need to understand. Why did you really leave it all behind?
I wanted to build things that stood up, not reputations. My father was a concrete man. I came back to that.
He didn't want fame or money. He just wanted to build something real.
By dawn, the drone footage was cued for broadcast. The secret had only hours left. That evening, Richard climbed to the highest scaffold and sat with his back against a column, the 3 towers he designed glowing across the street.
My father laid concrete for 40 years. He'd say, build something that stands, son. The rest is noise.
Crew's been talking. They say, you used to be the boss upstairs. Why'd you really come down?
Because up there I drew lines. Down here I make them real. My father's hands were like this.
The next morning, Margaret called a partners meeting. When Richard walked in, David Sloan pushed a contract across the table.
Full principal partnership. Richard, come back to where you belong. You've earned it.
I belong on the ground, but I'll do the topping out ceremony. I'll announce the scholarship. Then I go back to pouring concrete.
The crew will stand with you. We'll do this your way.
I used to think prestige was everything. Now I see that steel feels colder than concrete.
The decision was final. In 2 weeks, the topping out ceremony would reveal the hand that had built a skyline. In the week that followed, the construction site transformed. Workers hung banners, and the steel skeleton slowly grew its skin. One evening, as Richard secured his tools, Stephen approached him, his shadow stretching long across the concrete.
I was an arrogant fool. You designed the towers that made this firm, and I banned you from a trailer.
Richard didn't answer. He just nodded once, lighter than the apology deserved, and picked up his hard hat. The next day, as the crew gathered for break, Jamal stepped forward, his voice carrying the weight of everyone present.
Whole crew knows now. We got your back, Richard. You are family.
For a moment, Richard looked over his men, and the concrete dust on his cheeks glistened with something that wasn't sweat. Margaret finalized the scholarship paperwork in the partners' conference room, the golden hour light catching her reading glasses.
The Richard Reeves Architecture Scholarship. Full tuition for 1 black student every year. You just need to sign.
He pulled out a gold pen, the same one from his 1998 AIA Fellow Certificate, and pressed it to the page. The night before the topping out ceremony, Richard returned to the coffee shop one last time, not to meet Margaret, but to settle his own ghosts. A white-haired man slid into the booth across from him. A ghost from the 90s architecture wars, now heading a rival firm.
Put the check away. I don't want your money or your towers. I am building something else.
He slid out of the booth, walked through the door, and left the rivals staring, the check still spinning slowly on the wood. Stephen had been watching from across the street. He'd followed Richard, needing to understand something he couldn't name. Later, he found Margaret in her office, the desk lamp the only light, a photo of the 1996 tower on her desk.
I don't know if I can keep leading, Margaret. I don't even know if I am an architect.
Then maybe you are ready to learn. It's never too late to start over, Stephen.
On the desk, a younger Richard smiled from a 1996 photograph, holding a model of the very tower that had started it all. Stephen reached for the frame, held it under the lamplight, and didn't say another word. At 5 a.m., Jamal knocked on the crew trailer door. The noise outside was already a low roar.
Richard, you ready? There's like 100 news vans outside.
Ready.
He adjusted the faded Principal, 1998, sticker on his hard hat, just as he had every morning for 25 years. They walked toward the site gate, where cameras clicked like hail on steel. At the gate, Stephen waited in a tailored suit, his face drawn but steady.
Walk in with me, shoulder to shoulder, like it should have been from the start.
Richard met his eyes, gave a single nod, and the two architects, one in silk, one in safety orange, stepped through the gate together. The flashes lit his hard hat, the weathered sticker gleaming against the washed-out dawn. Behind them, Jamal and the crew fell in, a wall of hard hats and quiet pride. Margaret Crane stepped to the podium, and the crowd fell silent as the topping-out banner snapped in the wind.
2 months ago, a napkin saved this tower. The man who drew it designed the 3 towers behind this site. He's been working beside us for 25 years.
The screen behind her lit up with the 1996 tower, then a photograph of a young black architect, then the same face, aged and steady. The construction crew erupted first, then the partners, then the cameras, then the cameras. Stephen stepped forward, his voice rough.
I once banned this man from a blueprint trailer. He's the best architect I've ever met.
Richard, in his orange vest, stood beside his crew and accepted nothing more than a quiet nod. For the first time, the man who had built a skyline had a name, and it was Richard Reeves. The 3 towers behind him gleamed, finally wearing their creator's face. Richard Reeves stepped to the microphone, and the applause fell to a waiting silence.
I didn't build those towers for awards. I built them to build something else. Every cent of my consulting fee, $1.4 million, establishes a scholarship for black architecture students.
A young man in the front row, an architecture student, covered his mouth, his shoulders shaking. Richard extended his hand and motioned the young man onto the steel stage.
This is for you. Go build something that stands. That's the only thing that matters.
The student pulled Richard into a rough, grateful hug, and the crowd rose to its feet. Then Richard took off his hard hat and looked at the faded Principal, 1998 sticker, the last piece of his old life.
He slid it back onto his head, gripped the mic, and said, I'll be back on the concrete line tomorrow morning.
The applause thundered, but Richard Reeves was already stepping down, heading back toward his crew. As Richard threaded through the reporters, Stephen pushed past a camera crew and caught his elbow.
Richard, wait. I'll step down. You should lead this firm. It belongs to you.
You lead, I build. That's the way it should be. The firm needs you, not me.
Stephen opened his mouth, but the certainty in Richard's voice left him no room to argue. By the concrete mixer, his crew had already gathered, leaning on shovels, grins lighting their faces. Jamal stepped forward and slapped Richard's shoulder pad hard enough to crack dust.
Welcome back, boss. The crew's been asking if you are gonna make them look bad again.
Never left. And if I outwork you, that's just old habit.
He picked up his trowel, the curved steel still warm from the afternoon sun. Behind him, the 4 towers rose against the goldening sky, a skyline he had built with both pen and hand. The next morning, Richard arrived at 5 a.m., flipped the coffee switch, and touched the old trowel his father had used 40 years before. Jamal came through the door with a rolled newspaper and a grin that wouldn't fade.
Richard, check this out. Front page. Mystery architect returns to concrete.
Richard took the paper, glanced at the headline, and smiled. Miles away in her office, Margaret's phone buzzed. A photo from Stephen. An empty corner office. A note on the desk. "I am going to teach." It's what he would have wanted. Stephen had already packed his Bauhaus glasses and left the firm he once clawed to lead. He stood for a moment on the street, looking up at the 1996 tower, then walked toward the campus. Richard, meanwhile, was already on the concrete line, his crew working with a new kind of pride. Jamal looked over at him, the 4 towers standing behind them, and Richard nodded without a word. At sunset, Richard climbed the scaffold alone to the 20th floor, the city lights flickering on below him. Margaret was already there, her silver hair catching the last light, her eyes on the skyline.
I figured you'd come up here tonight. The view is yours.
Not mine. Never was. I just drew the lines.
Margaret checked her phone and looked up.
The scholarship already has over 200 applications. Kids who want to build.
Good. That's what it's for.
He pointed at the 1996 tower, its Verendeel truss glowing like a steel spine.
That truss design that came from my father. He was a steel worker for 40 years. I just drew what he taught me.
Margaret stared at the tower, then at Richard, finally understanding that steel and concrete were never separate to him. They stood in silence, the skyline a testament to a man who never stopped building. The next morning, Richard and Jamal were on the concrete line, laughing at something low that only a crew shares. At the site fence, a young girl in a yellow dress pressed her face against the chain link, a drawing clutched in her hand. Her mother pointed toward Richard and asked, "Is that the man who built the big glass buildings?" Jamal nudged Richard, who glanced over, saw the girl, and set down his trowel.
You, the one with the drawing. Let me see that.
She held up a crayon sketch of a glass tower, the Verendeel truss drawn in purple, the clouds in green.
This is good. See the base? That's where the concrete goes. Maybe you'll build the next one.
Then he took off his hard hat, peeled the faded Principal 1998 sticker from its brim, and pressed it onto the corner of her drawing.
This sticker belonged to a man who learned from his father. Now it's yours. Use it to build something that stands.
Her eyes went wide, her smile a promise. Richard put his hard hat back on, nodded to her mother, and walked back to the concrete line. By late afternoon, Richard was at the concrete mixer again. The skyline behind him a sculpture of glass and steel, the 3 towers he had designed, and the new 4th one rising beside them, stood like a family of light against the deepening sky. Inside the crew trailer, past the coffee pot and the old trowel, the girl's drawing was pinned next to a blueprint of the 1996 tower, the faded Principal. 1998 sticker sat in the corner, next to a purple truss and green clouds. Outside, Richard pulled the lever on the mixer, and the wet concrete poured out in a silver stream. His boots were splattered again, his hands gray with dust, the work settling back into its ancient rhythm. Behind him, the cranes had stopped, the scaffold empty, and the 4 towers stood watching. Richard stopped for a moment, looked up at the glass spines, and the faintest smile settled on his face. He didn't say anything. He just let the concrete flow, smoothing it with the same hands that had once held a napkin nobody would ever forget. And the skyline, his skyline, kept rising,